Hello once again, my fellow gamers. It is I, Rtyuiope, from Rtyuiope's Game Room, here with the last Year of Megami Tensei video. This month I'll be taking a look at the current era of the mainline games, which span from Shin Megami Tensei 4 through Shin Megami Tensei 5. This era is where the series takes a big turn, for better or for worse. Kazuma Kaneko is replaced as the primary artist for the series by Masayaki Doi, and Kazuyuki Yamai, or Maniacs, taking most of the creative control for SMT. Now, without further ado, let us take a look, shall we? Shortly after the release of Strange Journey, the idea of SMT4 was still fresh in the brains of many of the development team at Atlus. They knew they wanted to make a fourth installment along with the fans' requests and support, but they were waiting for the right opportunity, and they saw that opportunity with the Nintendo 3DS. The early concept ideas quickly went underway soon after the release of Strange Journey. They wanted SMT4 to be a convenient experience, and they knew that they could accomplish that with the 3DS. SMT4 was released in 2013 for the 3DS, and the team was made up of a ton of employees, new and old, who came together to make this new title. Due to this, there was a lot of resistance when coming together, causing a lot of internal conflict. Yamai went into detail about how the new staff wanted to make the game sweet and with female characters saying nice things. Yamai and fellow Atlus veterans strongly disagreed against making SMT a contemporarily sweet title. This conflict, however, was resolved by adding things that both sides could agree on without deviating too much from what makes SMT dark and grim. This conflict became apparent to some fans of the series due to conflicting tones that were both in SMT4 and SMT4 Final/Apocalypse. This game's aesthetic tried to stay true to SMT 1 and 2 as best as possible by trying to make a punk style in a post-apocalyptic world. Kazuma Kaneko took the back seat as being the character designer this time, to instead being a scenario writer. Kaneko supposedly wrote 8 volumes worth of content for this story, with 3 major arcs. There was so much story content, in fact, that only 1 arc out of the 8-volume story draft was used for the final SMT4 story as we know it. This arc was internally known as the Resurrection Arc, and most likely was in reference to some of the major themes in this arc's story. The main art director this time was Eiji Yoshida, who worked on both Nocturne and Strange Journey, while Doi took the reins as the character designer after he proved himself with the Trauma Center games, and the Persona 2 remasters. They had new demon designs handled by Kite Amemiya, Yoshihiro Nishimura, and Kiyoma Aki of Super Sentai and Kamen Rider fame as guest designers. The gameplay stays relatively the same as previous installments, but with more of a unique mix of them all. The dungeons are now in third person like Nocturne, while they did away with random encounters. Now enemies appear as data clusters that you can hit for a preemptive strike, a la Persona 3, 4, and 5. The battles, however, are more reminiscent of Strange Journey, where it's first person with animated sprites and attacks. The game utilizes its own version of the press turn system called the Smirk system, where if you hit an enemy's weakness, on top of getting an extra turn, your character smirks, which allows you to hit the enemy again, but this time as a critical attack. The map is still the isometric blue arrow guide, which is a serious staple at this point, but you will be able to explore some unique, albeit rather small, areas. There's also the addition of smaller enemy dungeons called Demon Domains, where you can fight some mini-bosses for treasure or unlock the next way to go. All in all, it takes SMT mechanics that we are used to and does things slightly different with them. Demon fusion and negotiation make a return as well. This mechanic is kind of flawed, however, since the attacks that the partners do aren't always in the best interest, such as Walter hitting a fire demon with fire. This game also has a cool Street Pass feature where you can meet other players' demons to perform an all-out attack with devastating damage. Another deviation from previous recent SMT games is Shoji Meguro is no longer doing the music for the game, but instead is composed by Atlus's design team, such as Ryota Koruka, Toshiki Konishi, and Kenichi Teshuya. The music for the game was composed late in development, and they were given a limited amount of tracks that they were supposed to make. But of course, they quickly went over that limit. The music was made to make subtle references to melodies from previous SMT games to be a nod to older fans. Unlike previous SMT games where the initial setting is Tokyo, however, the game starts off in the Eastern Kingdom of Kado, which is a medieval-inspired village with hints of Japanese culture sprinkled in. We follow our protagonist, whose default name is Flynn, who has a dream of becoming a royal samurai in the kingdom. Him and his best friend Ishitar travel from their farm village to the kingdom in hopes of realizing this dream. Ishitar fails, while Flynn succeeds, separating them from each other for the time being. Flynn is acquainted with his peers Isabeau, Jonathan, and Walter, and Navarre, who all train together to become true samurai, but due to the meddling of the mysterious Black Samurai, Flynn and his crew, minus Navarre, set off below Mikado's surface to discover that their kingdom actually lies on top of the ruins of Tokyo. Here is where some of the last surviving humans of the old world fight to survive from demons and each other. It's left to Flynn and his friends to figure out what happened that led to Tokyo to this state, and what to do about Tokyo's future. The game was a great success in both Japan and the West, and at the time it was Atlus's second best-selling game in the company's history, just behind Persona 4. The game received a 37 out of 40 from Famitsu, and received scores ranging between 8 and 9 out of 10, with many Western reviewers. The fans either loved this game or felt meh about it. There was obviously a lot of conflicting tones here with this title due to the conflicts behind the scenes, but it still ended up being average to positive in the minds of dedicated SMT fans. Quickly, due to the success of SMT4, Team Maniacs worked quickly on making an enhanced director's cut version of the game, much like the director's cut of Nocturne. However, the added content quickly started to pile and pile and pile to the point where it was almost entirely a different game. So they then decided to make the added content into its own game as the controversial SMT4 Final, or as it's known here in the West, Apocalypse, to avoid confusion of it being assumed that it's the final SMT game. SMT4 Apocalypse was released in 2016 for the 3DS as a continuation/new ending for SMT4's story. Team Maniacs asked a lot of Japanese fans for their input on what could be improved or changed for this title as a part of a survey. Yamai returns as the director, but Doi is the character designer, and it is unclear if this game's story was a part of Konako's original 8-volume draft. But seeing as this was initially intended as an enhanced version of SMT4 as an afterthought, I assume the story is almost entirely separate from Konako's initial vision. But this game wasn't entirely devoid of Konako, however. The basic scenario ideas were still created by Konako, while all the finer details were sorted out by writer Yusuke Miyata. The new demon designs that were done by the Kamen Rider and Super Sentai folks for SMT4 were now redone by Doi for this title to fit more with the character designs, while staying true to how they were initially done. Doi initially envisioned the protagonist to be an adult who becomes possessed by the demon Dagda, but Yamai felt that the story's central theme of breaking bonds and individuality fits more with how teenagers would act, so Yamai requested Doi to instead make the protagonist and his friends teenagers instead. The development team had one goal in mind, and that was to make the very best RPG on the 3DS, and while this game is often praised for its fun gameplay, many people's problems arise with the game's story. But before we go to that, let's talk about the new additions to the gameplay this time around. The biggest things that were changed to the gameplay were balancing and the redone partner system. Now you get to pick the partner who goes into battle with you, and now they actually do attacks that make sense and won't screw you over and your whole party, except for maybe Gaston. Also, after a few set of turns, your partners can perform a devastating attack on your enemies. Now, the new balancing to the game makes it so that you can deal ridiculous amounts of damage really easily, like in the upper thousands or like 10,000s. But the drawback there is that the enemies can do the same to you. And there will be numerous occasions of back-to-back boss rushes with no breaks, which can really test your limits. The story follows Nanashi and his best friend Asahi, who are demon hunter recruits, in the remains of Tokyo in the same world as SMT4. The game starts in the middle of SMT4, where Flynn is being recognized all throughout Tokyo, where Nanashi and Asahi want nothing more than to be great hunters like Flynn. This blind ambition ends up getting Nanashi slaughtered by a demon, but before his friend Asahi meets the same fate, Nanashi is possessed by the demon Dagda, who resurrects him at the cost of being his subservient godslayer. Nanashi slowly becomes friends with more hunters and members of separate factions in Tokyo, but due to the game's central story of breaking bonds, you're left with the choice of staying with your friends and bringing peace, or betray them and become essentially a god to recreate a world of anarchy. The game still retains the original alignments of law and chaos, but those aren't the central focus of this title. Rather, the new alignments of peace and anarchy, which is like chaotic law and chaotic neutral, take center stage. The game was still a success sales-wise, but sold only about half of what SMT4 did. The game received positive reviews from critics, but mixed reception amongst the fanbase. It's almost universally agreed that it has some of the best gameplay that any SMT game has to offer, but the story this time around betrays some of the central story conventions of SMT games prior, such as making Yahweh, or God, the central antagonist of this game with no real sympathy to him or his cause, which goes greatly against Kaneko's vision of Yahweh from SMT2, where Yahweh was only a threat, but wasn't evil. The game also suffers from a lot of anime tropes, which weren't too common in the series at this point. You can tell that the new staff members really got their way with this game unlike previously, even so far as to adding a beach scene DLC. The fanbase is really split between whether or not this game deserves the SMT title. I, however, sit with the half that say it generally does, but I can say without an ounce of doubt that I can understand the other half's arguments against this one. Now, there isn't too much information on these next two in the West since they haven't been released stateside at this time of the video being uploaded, so instead I'll condense it into one section, but definitely expect a more in-depth review of these two games when it comes out stateside. But first, let us talk about Deep Strange Journey, or as it's known everywhere else, Strange Journey Redux. SMT's Deep Strange Journey was announced in 2017 for the 25th anniversary of Shin Megami Tensei. The game is a port of the original Strange Journey for 3DS, much like Devil Survivor Overclocked and Record Breaker, adding new content to the story while rebalancing the gameplay, adding more demons, and making it fit more in line with SMT4 and 4 Apocalypse. The game story is just about the same, except with a few endings and a new character named Alex, different character. The origins of Alex are mysterious, but all we know about her is that she wants you dead. The game also has a drastic overhaul of the art style, which is very upsetting being a huge fan of Kazuma Kaneko. His art was perfectly fine, and I'm sure he would not have minded to make one new character design for Alex. But unfortunately, that's not what we got. The entire cast of human characters were redesigned by Atlas Design Team, basically a team of artists that don't usually do character designs, but I bet Doi was very busy doing SMT5 so that he couldn't really do a lot of the character designs except for Alex and a handful of demons. A lot of fans have expressed their disapproval for the remake of this game for three major reasons. One, it's very unnecessary because the last one came out not too long ago and it's still perfectly fine as it is. Two, the art style change, which was very unnecessary once again, which I agree with. It's not something that will ruin the experience, like many people are expecting, but it's a very huge shame as a series as artistic as SMT is being reduced to such a generic anime art style. And number 3, the tacked-on inclusion of Alex into the game's main story. Many people were weary about her inclusion, but opinions from people who have played the Japanese version have said that her inclusion doesn't really affect the tone of the game that much, and fits pretty well. Also, the fact that her content is entirely optional also helps. I guess we'll find out when the game is released in the West. And finally, Shin Megami Tensei 5. We know next to nothing about this game other than what we were shown at the 2 trailers we got. A few things that we can observe from the new trailers include Doi's new demon designs being in 3D for the first time. We also get to see that the game has a section that takes place in pre-apocalypse, much like SMT 1 and 2. It is not clear if Doi or Kaneko will be returning for this game, but my money is on Doi due to his demon designs being prevalent in this one. The game is also being developed with the Unreal Engine for Nintendo Switch, which producer Yamai says will fast-track the game's development, but will still have a little while before it gets released. So expect it to take less time than Persona 5, but don't expect it to come out next year. The game was also announced during the 25th anniversary, first being shown off at the Nintendo Switch event under the name SMT HD. He also says that the game will tackle many issues such as terrorism, nuclear weapons, unemployment, retirement, etc. He also says that he wants to make the game a perfect mix of SMT3 Nocturne and SMT4, so fans of the series old and new can find something to enjoy here. But as of 2017, this is all the info we really have about the title. And finally, with all of that out of the way, our journey through this year of Megami Tensei has come to an end. This has been a fun year-long project that me and my collaborators have had a blast doing. And though it is sad to see this year of content come to an end, just know that this isn't the end of the channel. There will still be plenty of content on its way in the coming months, with plenty more games to talk about, Shin Megami Tensei or not. This year of Megaten was a great learning experience for me to keep doing what I love, and that's to entertain you guys. I am now creating a new show on this channel called Rtyuiope's Game Room, which will now be the main show of the channel. It is basically an amalgamation of a review and a retrospective of a particular game, movie, series, franchise, whatever. I have many more niche games I want to talk about, such as Gungrave, Drakengard/Nier, Kingdom Hearts, Legacy of Kain, Yakuza, and so much more. The support that you guys have shown me over the last few years have been more than anything I could have ever imagined. I know I'm still just a fledgling channel, and many of you might leave after this series is over, but to those of you who will stay with me on this new journey that I'm about to embark on this channel, thank you. And even if you were just a temporary guest here only for the Megaten content, thank you too. If it weren't for any of you guys, my channel would have long since ended. I hope to keep entertaining you guys for years to come with higher production values, more niche games and topics, and maybe some other goodies down the line. Just a few plugs before I go. If any of you wanted to meet me in person, you can meet me at IchibanCon 2017 in Concord, North Carolina, where I'll be dressed as Tatsuya Suo from Persona 2. Or if you wanted to keep up with my going-ons, you can follow me on Twitter. Also be sure to check out my partner Howard Heyman's content for any in-depth analysis on games. This dude literally wrote a several-page report on Nier Automata, which is absolutely bonkers. If you guys have any suggestions for this channel on where you'd like to see it go, or if you'd like to see me talk about a specific game, movie, show, whatever, just let me know in the comment section down below or on Twitter. Anyway, thank you all for this great year, and here's to another one. This is Rtyuiope from Rtyuiope's Game Room, signing out.